Chapter 41 Daddy, when is it? You are listening at novelfull.audio. The language in this chapter is a bit strong compared to other chapters because of the circumstances. I hope you don't mind. Beep. 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 What's the emergency? What happened? A man in a blue coat rushed towards the room filled with people and computers. It was the HQ of the technical department of UMA. Director, someone has hacked into our systems and also activated the nuclear weapons all around the world. It is a catastrophic level threat. One of the men wearing a suit and pants rushed toward the director and informed him. It's impossible. The director instantly declined his words and continued. All nuclear weapons are controlled by the main system, which has the strongest firewall that mankind has ever created. Unless it is activated by all 5 directors of UMA, nobody can sneak inside this firewall. Not nobody, Director. What if the creator of that firewall wants to sneak in? Suddenly, a man wearing jeans suddenly spoke. This man was none other than Barry. He was still typing on the keyboard speaking. At the same time, dozens of programs were opened on his desktop. No. He promised me that he will not use those things without permission. The director once again denied it but once again continued. But then again, nobody except him should be able to hack our main system. Did you find out what's going on? Director, it seems he didn't hide his intention. All of the nuclear weapons are targeted at one family. One of the top 10 families of the vampire race, Dorth family. Barry answered. Suddenly, the veins on the director's forehead popped out. 0. Oops. Barry let out a sigh and the next moment, the director roared inside the room. Oh, what did those pieces of shit do to our Brian? Find out. Find out immediately. Director, ahem. Would you mind hearing this without getting angry? Barry hesitated after hearing those angry words. He knows how much the director loves Brian and treats him like his own son. That's why even though Brian was on the verge of creating another war, he still supported Brian. But then again, he still remembered a confidential meeting where only top members were allowed. In that meeting, everyone swore an oath to wage a war against anyone who picks the fight against Brian. It was only because of Brian that they were able to push humanity toward the top of the food chain. Tell me. Although he seemed less angry, his tone was still full of rage. During this morning, the head of the Dorth family launched a raid on Brian's community, severely injuring him for the sake of kidnapping a girl. Oh. And, wait, what the heck? James is fighting Luke Edworth. How is this possible? Oh my God, is he now a Super Saiyan? What is going on? Barry. Suddenly, the director shouted and all of the excitement and confusion in Barry's eyes disappeared. He looked at the footage on the desktop and said. Sir, it seems like Luke Edworth went there to kidnap a little girl. I am trying to find a database about that girl. Strange. Brian is trying to save that girl as if she is his daughter. What the hell are you talking about? Brian is only 20.5 and he isn't even married. The director moved toward Barry as he looked at the desktop and his eyes widened. Wait, doesn't she look like Brian though? Come on, director. How is that possible? But, strangely, I couldn't find her identity in governmental database. Currently, I am searching the UMA database. Barry rolled his eyes and declined the thought, oh. He focused on finding the little girl. No, nothing, there is not a single piece of information about her. Wait, the system has found something that matched with the little girl. Suddenly, a new window appeared in front of them which froze them for a moment. What happened? Oh. This girl's DNA and Brian's DNA are the same. Wait, what the foo *k? The girl who was next to Barry also looked at the window and her eyes widened. Holy Mother foo *King God. What the hell is this? Shit. He is not just secretly married but also has an 8-year-old daughter. Slap. Suddenly, the director slapped Barry's head and said, "Idiot. He is not married. Try to match her DNA with everyone in this world. Use all of the processing power of our main system and connect me to that piece of shit." "Yes, director." Barry instantly connected him to Lucad's car. Inside his car, Lucad was sitting in the back seat and Ely was on the other side with tears flowing down her eyes. "Sir, the director of the technical department is calling you." The driver spoke. "Did they already get the news?" "Well, it doesn't matter. Connect the call." As soon as he connected the call, the director roared from the small screen. "You piece of shit, mother foo * King Leech, how dare you to kidnap Brian's daughter?" "Sir, Brian's daughter is just next to him. Mind your language." "Ahem. Sorry, little girl. Don't worry about anything. You will be absolutely safe. If this bastard dares touch even your hair, I will tear all of these agreement papers and wage the war against him." "Director, what the hell are you talking about?" Lucad narrowed his eyes with confusion. He didn't understand why the director was getting so angry. "You mother. Ahem. You leech, you just wait there. Barry, send Gabriel to take the little girl back." "Ahem. Director, I don't think we need to call Gabriel. I feel like the world is doomed already. Look." Saying so, he showed the display to the director where Ely's DNA was matched with someone else. And, it was none other than Lucy. "What the hell? He foo * ked the Blood Queen." The director almost fainted when he saw the screen. But, suddenly, the screen in the car turned blue for a moment and a single screen split into a double display. "It seems you are also here, director." A voice very familiar to Ely rang from the speaker. This voice made the HQ and the car silent. But a few seconds later, the director started babbling. "Brian, are you okay, child? Are you hurt? Should I send Elizabeth?" "No, I should come there myself." "Barry, call the helicopter." "Director, calm down. You are worried for nothing. I am fine." "Well, I am thankful that you care so much, let me handle this myself." Suddenly, a virtual projection appeared above the screen. We had a virtual projector. Lucad looked at the driver with confusion. "No sir, we do not have a virtual projector." The driver gulped down saliva as a new image appeared. It was the picture of several nukes that were activated and tried to launch. "Now, listen carefully, Lucad. The virtual projection that you see in front of you is the picture of every nuke on the planet and all of them are activated. Their target is also selected. Do you mind telling him, Barry?" "Dorth family," Barry's voice rang. "If I press a single button on my screen, all of those nukes will be launched. There are a total of 30,000 vampires in the Dorth family region. Out of 30,000 vampires, only 80.1 can block those nukes. Now, my question is here. Do you want to see the death of 20,919 vampires plus nearly 60,700 vampires who are nearby, or do you want to save them by dropping my daughter at the front door of my apartment?" "You are bluffing." Lucad didn't believe it at all while Ely looked at the screen with wide eyes. She never thought she could ever become the reason for the death and survival of 96,999 vampires. Because in her mind, she was very capable of her father's abilities, especially when it comes to the technical stuff. Now, it felt like her father had the entire world under his palm. "He is not bluffing, Lucad." The director's deep voice rang. Even he understood the seriousness in Brian's tone. Brian didn't answer him directly and Barry suddenly spoke. "Brian, did you launch a nuke just now?" Brian finally responded. "In 1 minute point 45 seconds, a nuke will hit your car. It is a middle-sized nuke. You can easily deflect it towards the sky. Of course, if you think I am bluffing and choose not, then if that nuke explodes, you know the consequences. If Ely loses even a part of her hair, it won't be your family members or other vampires suffering the consequences. It would be you. Blood Queen will slice you in half. Now, let's see, what would you do? When he asked, Lucid's eyes turned red. He is very much aware of the consequences of offending Blood Queen. That's why he hasn't let her get hurt. Ahem, Brian, my wife wanted to ask you something. Suddenly, the director's voice rang from the screen. When did she? Sorry that I even ask. Brian responded when he immediately director's habit of telling his wife instantly whenever a good or bad thing happens. He was truly a good husband. In fact, Brian wants to learn a lot from him except for his cursing habits. She told me to ask you. When is the wedding date? Guys, if you still remember that you can vote with Power Stones, right? Please help me a little bit. I know updates have shrunk down, but soon, it will go back to 2 chapters a day. Chapter 42. She is finally here. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sir, it is true. There is a missile coming right towards us. The driver glanced outside from his side mirror and immediately warned Lucid. Damn you, human. Lucid growled with anger and jumped out of the car. He floated in front of the missile and released a lot of blood from his blood bank. He held the missile with his bloody hand and floated it towards the sky. Suddenly, the sky turned a little dark and the hurricane appeared in front of him. This wasn't a normal hurricane though. When it appeared, it formed a purple portal in front of him. Beep. Beep. The missile let out a sound that shocked him. He immediately threw the missile towards the portal. Boom. As soon as the missile struck the portal, it exploded. Lucid used his blood to form a wall in front of him. After a few seconds though, the explosion slowly vanished together with the portal. Lucid angrily rushed back at the car and shouted, "Damn it! You used me to close that portal. So what? I was just giving you a demonstration of what could happen if you make the wrong decision. Now, I will give you 10 minutes to return my daughter, and if you do not appear within 10 minutes, the missiles will launch on their own." Beep. Beep. Suddenly, the screen changed and a countdown appeared on his screen. Lucid clenched his fist with hatred. 0. Hee hee. On another side, Ely giggled with a bright smile. Her father was weak, but he won't break his promise. If anyone dares to hurt her, he will destroy his entire family. How dare you laugh? Lucid turned at Ely and tried to clutch her head, but he could only see the mocking smile on her face. It was clear that even if he wanted, he can't hurt her. Even though he has kidnapped her, he hasn't hurt her. That means Blood Queen still has to behave despite being the strongest. There are things that she can't do without a proper reason. This is why he was very angry. A slight mistake could cost his life, but he wanted to make this mistake. He wanted to slap her. Unfortunately, even he is bound by strength. Blood Queen's strength is absolutely dominant. Nobody can challenge her authority unless they have a proper reason. And, this reason was quite simple. He was quite scared of her, but his family wanted him to marry her. If he marries Blood Queen, Ely will become his daughter and the next strongest vampire who could easily dominate humans and werewolves. Because even Blood Queen, despite being the strongest, can't overcome the forces of werewolves. They don't have the strongest ones like her, but they have a lot of strong people only one step behind her. Unlike them, the conditions of vampires were quite miserable. The difference between Blood Queen and him was huge, that he trembles just with her gaze. Despite both of them being the heads of 2 of the top 10 vampire families. Return. Lucid gritted his teeth and commanded. But the driver had already turned around. In fact, he was also helpless. He had already made the intention to return because if those nukes fall on Dorth family territory, his family will die as well. Oh. Lucid noticed it but didn't say anything. Not only did he lose nearly 8 beta vampires but also couldn't accomplish his mission. He felt shameful as a human. I will kill him. I can't kill him now, but he is a human, right? He would need to come out for shopping or anything else. I will kill him as soon as I get the chance. First, I should teach those arrogant humans a lesson. How dare they use such tone in front of me? Although he lost his opportunity, he didn't lose his mind. If he attacks Brian directly, Brian can launch those weapons. So, he must attack him whenever he is out, and took him out in a single hit. Within 8 minutes, his car was already back in Zone B. He used his blood aura to fly to Brian's apartment and pressed the bell. Creak. The door opened and the person behind the door was none other than Brian. The blood aura around Ely disappeared and she dashed towards Brian. Daddy. For some reason, she didn't cry but rather just jumped into his embrace. Holding her, Brian gave him a straight gaze and said, "Next time if you want to fight me, make sure that you don't care about anyone." Then, he turned around as he continued, "Because I don't. For my daughter, even if I have to blow up the earth, I will do it." Creak. The door closed and Lucid gritted his teeth outside. He didn't take the car but rather fly towards the headquarters of the UMA. "Elders, I need you to come to the headquarters. These humans are getting too arrogant and have forgotten their place." After a few minutes, he crashed the glasses and landed inside the office. In that office, there were their people. But, his gaze was only on one person. The director of the technical department. He walked towards him while releasing his insane bloodline pressure. "Human, do you think you can fight vampires just because you have acquired a little strength with your technology?" His tone was full of anger and frustration. Bang! Suddenly, another aura burst out next to him. This aura belonged to a person who was standing next to the director. Two auras collided and repelled each other. Tap. The director tapped the table with his finger and looked at Lucid. "Mr. Lucid, I don't know if you are aware of this or not, despite being the head of Dorth, but Mr. Brian is the most important person for the entirety of UMA. The person standing next to me represents the current strength of humanity as an individual, but Mr. Brian represents the future strength of humanity as a unity. Anything that threatens his life must be exterminated, but since you are the head of the family, this is the final warning for you." The director stood up and continued, "If you wage a war against me or Gabriel, it will mean nothing. But, if you wage a war against Mr. Brian, you wage a war against humanity. Are you clear enough?" "You." Lucid clenched his fist when he felt humiliated because he didn't know this at all. And, he was the head. "Don't worry, director, he perfectly got this." Suddenly, another voice rang from the side as an elderly man floated next to him. "Lucid is a new head of the family, so he isn't aware of many things. But, don't worry, we will teach him everything. Let's return him now." Another elder who was female smiled and answered. "Leave. Who told you that you can leave?" Suddenly, a voice rang from the door and a figure slowly entered. "Oh, crack. Crack. Crack." The walls started cracking, the wind changed into a hurricane and the lightning bolt suddenly struck outside the headquarters. Thud. 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 Lucid and two elders suddenly fell to their knees. At this moment, two people who were next to the director burst out their auras but didn't dare to collide. They only used it to protect the director. The person who was walking towards them. They had no intention of offending this person. They didn't even want to fight this person. Superheroes weren't afraid of vampires. They were the soldiers of humanity. They are willing to fight for humanity in order to defeat the vampires, but this person alone installed such a fear in their hearts that they can't summon the courage to fight. She is here. Why? Why is she here? Is she going to kill me? Is she going to kill me? Lucid couldn't even raise his head. His heartbeat was so loud that the elders next to him could hear. But, even they had sweat on their foreheads. Suddenly, a red aura wrapped around Lucid's neck. His body slowly floated towards the sky, and the next moment, his eyes fell on her. The peerless beauty, bloody red eyes, silver hair, and aura of a queen. She was standing right in front of him, the incarnation of blood and death. Lucy Bathory was standing right in front of him. She raised her hand and slowly moved her fingers inside. As she does that, the grip around Lucid's neck narrowed and a cold tone rang in his ears. Tell me. Who gave you the courage to kidnap my daughter and injure my husband? Chapter 43 Lucy Bathory Part 1 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Under the shadow of a large golden roof, da-da. A cute voice rang out from a small baby. A woman with silver hair and red eyes looked at the baby, who had the same eyes and hair but a slightly different facial structure. Da-da, the baby spoke once again, but a trace of sadness appeared in that woman's eyes. But, she quickly sensed the movement of the baby and smiled at her. Eli, why don't you say ma? Come on, say ma. The woman tried to convince her daughter, but unfortunately, the daughter continued to say the same words. Da-da, she took a deep breath and looked at the maid standing next to her. Alicia, hold her for a moment. Yes, my queen. Alicia nodded her head and took the baby from her embrace. Even though she left her mother's embrace, she didn't cry but rather continued muttering da-da-da. The woman turned around and walked away. After a while, she came in front of a massive hall. In the middle of the hall, there was a large stone, and behind that, an old lady was meditating. Great Prophet, I want to bring him here. As soon as she reached in front of her, she spoke. The Great Prophet opened her eyes and said, Lucy, I told you before. And my answer will remain the same. Death. 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 You said this 100 times. I am the strongest being on this earth. There is no one that I can't protect. Why are you so afraid of his death? Lucy stomped her foot on the ground and shouted at her, 0. Lucy, do you think my prophecy is wrong? The Great Prophet didn't argue but rather asked her a question. This question instantly turned her off. She couldn't utter any words. Because the Great Prophet has been spoken a single false prophecy. Even though there might be changes, the consequences remain the same. Lucy, Brian Jackson is the hope of our earth. We are no longer on the path of that planet. We are just banished, people. If we want to grow stronger than this, we must make our planet stronger. And, with our potential, we alone can't do this. Not even the werewolves. We need humans. That's why we signed the peace treaty. The hope mustn't die. The Great Prophet spoke with a loud voice, but it didn't reach outside the hall. Lucy took a deep breath and spoke, but, I am still going to bring him here. Hearing her words, the Great Prophet stared at her. He is a father. He deserves to know that he has a daughter. I love him. I fell in love with him when he was just 10. All this time I have been following him in the dark, but I can't continue this. I want to be his wife. I want to marry him. Eli deserves to see her father. She deserves to call her father in front of him. He deserves to hold and raise her. What kind of wife wouldn't let her husband know that she has a child? Tell me. What kind of wife would I be if I don't tell him that I love him? Because he will die. The Great Prophet roared, oh. Lucy turned silent once again. The moment you bear his child, for the next 10 years, you aren't allowed to meet him. This is what fate means. The Great Prophet tried to convince. But, Lucy wasn't ready to listen. She rebuked. Then, I don't give the damn about fate. What was the reason I became the strongest person on the earth? Wasn't it to protect my family? He is my family. He is my husband. What is the value of this strength if I can't use it to protect him? I am not going to listen to you anymore. I know you can't stop me. I just came here to inform you. Ely is already 1 year old. She needs her father to be with her from now on. As for his protection, it's my job. I will protect him no matter what. Then, she turned around. Suddenly, a crystal ball flew towards her. She quickly caught it though and turned back. It is the best good luck charm I have ever created. It costs me 50 years of my lifespan. Hopefully, this will clear the bad luck that you are going to cause. The great prophet responded and closed her eyes. I don't need such a thing. As I said, I will protect him no matter what. But still, I will keep it just to make you feel relief. Lucy finally smiled and flew at her extreme speed. 5 minutes later, she stood in front of a gate with eyes wide open. Inside the gate, 2 bodies fell by the claw of the vampire as they throw a 20-year-old boy away. But, when they fell, they pulled a trigger of a bomb. Boom! Sacrificing their own lives, they took down a few vampires. But, this only sparked the flames of revenge in the eyes of that teenager. Tears fell down his cheeks as he roared. Come at me, you leeches. I will kill every single one of you. I will exterminate vampires from the earth. At this moment, his body got covered in sheet metal. Why? I could have protected myself. Why did you give up? He looked at the sky and roared. He didn't understand why his parents give up. Because the metal armor he had created was blocking the attacks from the vampires. Unfortunately, he didn't understand their true intentions. His metallic armor got pierced by the claw of another vampire. Only at this moment does he understand the knowledge he had couldn't protect him. Only if he had the strength of superheroes. Only if he had the strength to crush these vampires. At this moment, Brian truly learned the importance of strength. Just when another vampire tried to pierce his body through that hole, a powerful pressure appeared. Lucy walked towards him with tears following down her cheeks. Please don't hate me. I really didn't do this. She was begging. At this moment, the strongest being in the world was begging to a man. But, there was nothing but hatred in his eyes. Brian instantly remembered, and the next moment, he instantly remembered another figure with the same hair and eyes. You. You are also one of them, aren't you? You are the reason why my parents are dead. I hate you, bitch. Die. Brian was holding a sharp metal that he pierced towards her. Splash. And, she couldn't stop it. She didn't stop it. She raised her hand and clenched her fist. Splash. 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 Dozens of heads fell down. All of those belonged to these vampires. She killed every single one of them, but she couldn't block his attack. Suddenly, she wrapped her arms around him. Sorry. Sob. Sob. I understand why she forbade me to come here. I understand everything. I am sorry. I am sorry. Let me go. Brian tried to struggle, but unfortunately, he couldn't break free. She was holding him so tight that she could have suffocated him if she wanted to. You have a daughter. You can hate me, but please don't hate her. Suddenly, Brian's brain stopped working. The genius mind instantly got destroyed. He couldn't believe what he just heard. I think that is enough. If it is more than that, then I won't be able to erase his memories. Suddenly, the great prophet appeared behind her and tapped on Brian's forehead. The next moment, his body slowly fell, but she quickly caught him and turned at the great prophet. Why? What's happened has already happened, but pain needs time to heal. You don't need to appear in front of him. You don't need to make him remember these moments. I have sealed them inside his mind. One day when all of his hatred for vampires dies down, he will eventually learn the truth. Let's go home. Since your blood bank is getting empty, you can use that orb to come here and meet him without letting him know to get his blood each month. But, you are not allowed to appear in front of him for 8 years. The great prophet turned around and slowly walked away. Oh, Lucy bites her lips as she looked at Brian. The stab that he did was already healed. She left a little of her aura to keep him protected and rushed away. Didn't you say 10 years before? Yes, it was originally 10 years. But since this incident has already consumed some of that bad luck, the time limit has decreased to 8 years. But, I still suggest you wait till he remembers it, or you would have to try your best to make him fall in love with you. The great prophet explained. I don't want him to remember. So, I will make him fall in love with me. After 8 years, I will go and live with him. Chapter 44 Lucy Bathory Part 2 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Alicia, are you still taking care of her? One of the maids suddenly looked at Alicia, who was holding the baby in her hand, and asked. Yes. Queen has gone out for some business. Alicia replied, but her tone was a little tone. The baby is almost 2 years old now, but she still doesn't know her father. Of course, they know he is human, but they don't know who. And, they only learned it when their queen actually told them. As for his identity, they don't even know his name. So, they obviously can't find him. Oh, hush. I heard Queen is on that mission. She even personally apologized to humans for that incident. Does she really have to go so far? They are just a bunch of lowly humans. The maid snorted while doing her job. Are you trying to find fault in Queen's action? Alicia stared at the maid and a slight killing intent emerged from her. No, I was just speaking nonsense. The maid immediately got frightened. Not only did Alicia have better status than her, but she also had better strength. There is no way she could gather enough courage to enrage her. Alicia snorted and walked away, but at this moment, a figure slowly walked inside. Tap. 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 Lucy walked in with cold eyes. There was not a single trace of emotions in her eyes. The blood was dripping from her hand and splashing on the floor. Alicia, keep her away from me for a while. And you, clean the floor. Without even looking at them, she commanded and walked towards her bathroom. 0. The maid frighteningly started cleaning while Alicia took the baby away while wondering. What happened to you, my queen? Did that incident hurt him? Was he living there? Are you angry because of that? At this moment, she suddenly remembered a news broadcast. 8 months ago, Lucy stood in front of a crowd of millions. Her aura was filled with blood and killing intent. As she stared at them, she spoke. I, Lucy Bathory, apologize to humans and werewolves for the recent mass slaughter that my race has caused in Zone B. While humans and werewolves managed to leave together, our people are still hesitating to flow the treaty. At this moment, the entire crowd was silent. Even though it was a crowd of millions, even the heartbeat could be heard. The apology from the strongest person in the world. Not to mention werewolves, even humans didn't expect that. But, her speech didn't end there. I apologize to everyone who lost their family, friend and dear person in that mass slaughter. So, I hereby declare that I will launch a killing sanction. I will investigate every single member of vampire or werewolf or humans who are trying to break the treaty and personally kill them. That's all. Oh. Saying so, her body floated towards the sky and she disappeared. Only after that, did the entire crowd burst into the discussion. Nobody expected that. Not even the people from Bathory family. Everyone was left dumbfounded. Queen, how many lives are you going to take to calm down that anger? Alicia looked at the window which belonged to Lucy's bathroom and muttered. Inside the bathroom, Lucy was looking at the mirror while washing her hands. As she looked in the mirror, she suddenly saw his picture, but it wasn't what she wanted to see. It was when he hated her race the most. Are you watching me on the news? I promise I will never let anyone hurt you. But, I couldn't keep my promise. At this moment, tears fell down her eyes. She still remembered how late she was. If she had reached there even 10 seconds early, she could have prevented all of that. He wouldn't have gone insane. They could have been together. But now, she can't even visit and comfort him. She can't even see him more than once a month. She was living in hell. After a while, she wiped away her tears and looked at the mirror once again. After that incident, I learned something. Even with my strength, I can't protect my love. But, I won't let it continue. If I can't protect you, then I will eliminate all the threats to you, even if that means killing everyone in this world. Her killing intent soared out of her bathroom, but before it reached Alicia, it instantly returned to her. She still has a daughter outside. She took a deep breath and left. After that, her slaughter continued. In no time, Ely was already 4 years old. Ely, what happened? Why are you sad? Lucy slowly walked toward her daughter, who was playing on a swing by herself. She had a sad expression on her face. Mommy, they always bully me. They say I am half-blood and I am not allowed to play with them. Ely bursts into tears and rushes toward her mother. After picking her up, Lucy pats her head and says, "Remember what I told you before. You don't have to get upset from the people who are beneath you." I remember. They can't even do simple quadratic equations. They are way beneath me. But Mommy, if I don't play with them, I will be alone. Is there no one smart as me at my age? Will I be lonely forever? Although she was only 4, she was smarter than a 10-year-old kid. Anything Lucy taught her just prints on her memories. She doesn't ever forget them, and more importantly, she can conclude on her own. Of course, there are. In fact, your daddy is 100, no 1,000 times smarter than you. He will never let you feel lonely. Lucy chuckled at her daughter's intelligence and responded. But Mommy, you said I can only meet Daddy after a long time. You didn't even give me the fixed date. Ely pouted as a trace of sadness appeared in her eyes. She never got a chance to meet her daddy. Haha. I have good news for you. Now, you only have to wait 3 years. Lucy smiled, which brightened both of their moods. Hooray! I can finally meet my daddy. Ely jumped from her embrace and started running around while jumping. Suddenly, a shadow appeared behind Lucy and kneeled. This shadow was none other than Alicia. She didn't change a bit, just like Lucy. Queen, Mr. Adam has agreed to have a private talk with you. Good. I will go and meet him. Keep an eye on her. Saying so, Lucy floated towards the sky and her body suddenly disappeared. After a few minutes, she reached in front of a castle. She floated towards the garden and landed there. It is quite unexpected to be graced by your presence, Queen. A voice rang from the side as a man walked towards her. He was around the height of her and had a fit body. He wasn't too handsome but still reached the standard of vampires, especially the Lord. You seem to be in a good mood. I heard that certain someone saved your daughter. Lucy spoke with an emotionless expression. She didn't even smile. You are still the same as ever. Though, nowadays those hands aren't getting dripped with blood. So, what made you come here and meet me? Adam asked while chuckling. What condition did he ask? Lucy narrowed her eyes and asked. Adam frowned for a moment, but the next moment, his eyes widened. In his mind, countless thoughts ran, and after 2 minutes, he responded, so, it is he. Truly unexpected. I never thought he was the chosen one. Enough with the nonsense. Tell me his condition. Lucy asked. She wasn't worried about him finding out about Brian. After all, it won't be long before everyone finds out. Adam shook his head. Actually, he didn't make any condition. In fact, he said that I am a great father. Ha ha ha. Do you know how funny this thing is? Slowly, tears fell down his eyes. I am not a great father. I am not a good husband. Because of me, my wife can't wake up. And, I almost killed my own daughter. What? What did he see in me to call me a great father? Your sacrifice. At this moment, Lucy suddenly answered, but unlike before, there was a great smile on her face. Adam was stunned seeing her smile. But, he quickly realized what she meant. A lord of vampire, the head of the vampire family, one of the strongest people, only second to the like of Lucy, kneeled in front of a human for the sake of his daughter. Lucy quickly withdrew her smile and asked, so, he doesn't hate vampires now? Adam shook his head and said, from the information I gathered, he lost his parents to the vampires. Just that won't be enough to calm down his anger. Hearing his words, Lucy's expression fell and a trace of sadness appeared in her eyes. But, when I was with him, he said something to me that stunned me for a while. He said, Mr. Adam, if I ever have a daughter, I bet I will be the happiest father in this world. Chapter 45 Lucy Bathory Part 3 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Those words shook her for a moment. She didn't expect him to be so attached to his daughter even though he doesn't have one. He doesn't know the reason why he is so attached. But she felt happy hearing this. Because now she has a little bit of confidence after meeting him. But, I have a question in my mind. Do you mind if I ask? Adam suddenly spoke and her eyes narrowed a bit. She shook her head soon and he continued. When Alexa was small, she loved me a lot. It was just how a child should love their parents. But, from the moment she grew up and her mother went into a coma, she started hating me. But, in her eyes, I was still her father. At least until when I pushed her to death. After that everything changed, she didn't even think of me as a person in her family. She thinks of me as her enemy. I am not saying that you would have such an idea, but would she truly love him if she doesn't meet him for a long time? After all, she is just a kid. She might get curious for a while but her love won't be pure and this will definitely make him sad, especially with how much he loves his future daughter. Oh, how do you expect to handle this? The more you wait, the worse it will get. Unless, you can make your daughter truly want to find him, her love for her father won't grow. Hearing his words, Lucy closed her eyes. This question almost shook her entirely. She didn't know how to reply. Her body slowly floated towards the sky and the next moment, she disappeared. Adam glanced at the sky and sighed. 0. After a few seconds, Lucy reached her mansion. She found Ely playing with Alicia. She stared at her daughter for a long time. Finally, something came to her mind and she started treating her daughter differently. She became a little harsh on her daughter, and never talked about her father. Ely also realized this and slowly, she started doubting that her mother won't let her meet her father. This discovery made her stunned and sad. She was only 6 years old. She wanted to find her father but she didn't have a single way and now her mother also doesn't talk a single thing about her father. So, she decided to find out about her father by herself. She didn't get the opportunity until she reached 7. Because during this time, she was taught about computers and technology. As a fast learner, she managed to find out about her father quickly and decided to leave the mansion on her own and find her father. On the day she found out about him, Lucy went for a closed training session. And, Ely successfully sneaked out of the mansion. Of course, it wasn't because she was good at it but rather nobody stopped her. When she left the mansion, there was a figure watching over her from the top of the mansion. Behind this figure, Alicia was on one knee. Queen, is it really okay to let her leave like this? The figure was none other than Lucy. She didn't go for a closed training session. She was just hiding from Ely. Looking at her daughter, she sighed, oh. Ely never got to see her dad. If I go with her right now, her relationship with him will not be that close. She might even see some conflict between us after all, he won't accept me that easily. That's why I want Ely to go there alone. I want her to meet her father and have fun with him. I want her to find out what kind of father she has. After hiding about her father for 3 years, her curiosity about him has grown a lot. And, now she also knows something about him, she should have already prepared how she is going to face him. Hearing her words, Alicia stayed silent for a moment. Queen, when will you meet him? When she heard this question, Lucy got lost in deep thoughts. She shook her head and said, I am not ready. Once I meet him, even if he won't love me, at least, I don't want him to hate me. But, I can't tell him the truth right now. I need some time. Saying so, she sighed. She really wants to meet him. She really wants to be with him all the time. But even with her strength, there are things that she can't do. Even as the strongest person, she is helpless when it comes to love. She failed to keep her promise once. Now, she failed to keep it again. Her hand locked his neck. Luca couldn't even move properly. He didn't even try to struggle, rather he was simply trembling. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel regret. His eyes turned at the elders who were just bowing their heads with no intention to help. Suddenly, he closed his eyes and remembered something. Elder, what do you mean? I won't touch her daughter. She will kill me. Luca shook his head frequently and denied the idea of 2 elders. Luca, we know that she is strong, but even she is bound by the rules. You have nothing to worry about. And, we are not telling you to touch her daughter. Just use your blood aura and kidnap her. She is living with a human. You would have no problem kidnapping her. And, if you do successfully, we can keep her in our control. Her daughter is her weak point. The male elder tried to convince him. But, Luca shook his head and said, Elder, she might be her weakness, but she is also her reverse scale. If I damage her even a little, she will kill me. No, I can't do this. Luca, you are the lord of the Dorth family. She is the lord of the Bathory family. Why are you so coward? If you can't even face her properly, you aren't worthy to become our lord. The female elder roared at him and tried to intimidate him. Elder, don't try to frighten me. Just because I am scared of her doesn't mean I am scared of you. Suddenly, Luca released his powerful bloodline pressure and tried to intimidate them. That means you don't mind other lords watching this video. Suddenly, the male elder took out a phone and played a video. In that video, Luca was just a kid and he was severely getting punched by Lucy. You. Luca's eyes shrunk. He clenched his fist as his furious pressure burst out of him. That was his weak point and also the reason why he feared Lucy so much. He didn't expect the elders to have this video. If it goes out, he will be a laughing stock because, in this video, he even begged to become Lucy's pet if she stops beating him. Luca, she is a key part of our plan. We need her at any cost. So, either go and kidnap her or let us show this video to everyone. The male elder didn't get intimidated by his pressure and tried to threaten him. Luca clenched his fist furiously and after a long hour of talk, he finally agreed. But, he was still unwilling to do this. When he remembered how he was threatened to do this, he gathered his courage and finally spoke. Lucy, I know my fate. I know I shouldn't have kidnapped her. But, there is still one thing that I want to do as a lord. His eyes turned at the elders, and he took out a drop of blood from his finger. The blood shot towards those elders and suddenly stamped a symbol on their forehead. For conspiring the death of Dorth Lord, I hereby declare you as the sinners. When they heard his words, they immediately tried to remove the symbol. Luca then turned at Lucy and said, It was them who told me to do this. Can you please take a step back? Hearing his words, Lucy closed her eyes for a moment. A few seconds later, she opened her eyes and said, From the beginning I knew, it wasn't you. After that day, you never got the courage to enrage me. But, I made a promise. And you are the reason why I couldn't keep it for the second time. Sorry, but from tomorrow, Dorth family will have a new lord. Splash. The next moment, his body suddenly flew towards her. She kicked his leg and broke them. She put her hand on his hair and pulled it out. The next moment, his entire head came out and the blood dropped all over her body. She turned and looked at the elders. When they saw her eyes, one of them shouted. Wait, you can't do this. We are the elders. I promise that I will kill anyone who tries to have bad thoughts about my family. But, you two crossed the line. Splash. Splash. Chapter 46 Lucy's Pride, Charlotte's Determination. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After killing those elders, Lucy turned her head at the director of the technical department. I hope you can handle the rest. Saying so, she left the room without even getting their response. As for the director, he already knew what to do. He pressed a button on his watch and made a call. Block all the news about the recent attack of vampires in Zone B. Zone B will be repaired by UMA. And also, send someone in my office to retrieve dead bodies. Yes, sir. After cutting off the call, he looked at the superheroes next to him and said. Thanks for coming so urgently. Gabriel shook his head and said, You are the director. It is our duty to protect you. But director, who is this Brian? Why haven't I heard about him at all? And, what about his relationship with Blood Queen? Another superhero standing next to him asked with curiosity. Well, his identity will go out sooner or later. Liam, there are lots of things that you can learn using your authority, but even your authority pales in comparison to you. When Liam heard those words, his eyes shrunk. As the second strongest superhero, he knew the limit of his authority. It could be said that except for the directors, he has every bit of authority to make changes or do anything. I understand your confusion. In fact, his authority is even higher than ours. And, we, directors under the guidance of 3 supreme leaders, took an oath to protect Brian even at the cost of war. 0. Of course, he doesn't care about that and lives in his own apartment in Zone B. But, nothing has changed. He is someone whose authority could rival Supreme Leader if he wanted to. But unfortunately, he isn't interested in those things. He only joined UMA so that he can develop new gods. In fact, if he had enough resources, then new gods would have been a part of a private company. You know how much that would affect the UMA, right? Liam nodded his head with a serious expression. Gabriel also had seriousness on his face. If new gods become part of a private company, then a new tyrant would be born in this world. Even though supreme leaders have every authority to do anything, if they do something that breaks the regular law, then directors can case the files against them and bring them down from the power. Of course, in terms of power, superheroes are the ones who have the public face. But, inside UMA, they are controlled by the directors and supreme leaders. Of course, if one day they go on a berserk, then these leaders and directors won't be able to do anything. Without new gods, humanity doesn't have a chance against them. Just imagine if 2 or 3 vampires whose strength is equal to her emerge in the vampire families. Our humanity will cease to exist. But directors, from what I know, the limit of the leveling system in New Gods is equal to us. So, how is this going to change much? Liam asked, interrupting the director. Director sighed and said, That's why we need him. He must be protected at all costs. Of course, now that we know that she is his wife, then we don't have to worry much. He has already provided the codes of New Gods 2.0. We are trying to implement the changes and improve them. It has been estimated that it will take a year. After that, even you two can join New Gods and improve. And, you don't have to start from level 0. In fact, you can start from your current strength and then continue to improve. Oh. Hearing his words, Liam and Gabriel was surprised. They didn't expect this news to come out so soon. Oh, Blood Queen directly left the office and went straight to her mansion. As soon as she reached there, she was greeted by Alicia. Did you check his situation? Yes, Queen. He doesn't have any injuries and young Miss is also fine. Alicia nodded her head and replied. What about that woman? Do you find her relationship with him? Lucy asked. At this moment, there was a hint of coldness in her eyes. Alicia hesitated for a moment before she finally gathered enough courage to speak. Queen, I am afraid, but it seems like they have already formed a relationship. It's not a married relationship, but it is very close, like dating. As she said that, she trembled from the cold aura coming out of Lucy. It took a while for Lucy to calm down. She took a deep breath and asked. How did we miss her? Queen, when we previously searched her, we only found friendship between them. And you said that woman helped him a lot, so let's not kill her. Alicia had a hard time blaming Lucy for this. In fact, Charlotte was already on their list to kill, but due to her good nature, Lucy didn't do anything against her. But, she didn't expect that to grow as well. Queen, do you want me to make a move? Alicia asked. No. We can't make a move now. The only reason why we were able to make a move against those women is that their life and death didn't matter much to him. But she has gone too close. If we do anything now, he will easily find out and blame us. Lucy shook her head and responded. But Queen, do we really not have any chance even with our strength? Alicia wasn't convinced that he would find out. After all, Brian didn't find out anything till now. Lucy shook her head and said he didn't find out because he didn't want to. There is not a single thing that can be hidden from him. He can even predict where the next portal will open if he really wants to. In fact, the latest technology to detect portal was created by him. From the outside world, he seemed like a normal person, but he has control over 50% of every technology in this world. He has a 30% share in Golden Wing Industries. He isn't even a little poorer than us. It's just that he doesn't care about wealth or anything else. If he wants, he can even buy UMA, but as I said, he really doesn't care. His only goal is to get stronger. If we target her now, then he will find out, and then, my only hope will disappear. Hearing her words, Alicia was truly shocked. Some of this information, like how many shares he had on Golden Wing Industries, wasn't even leaked to her. Then Queen, how are you going to succeed now? She was afraid that Lucy will get heartbroken once Brian rejects her. After all, he has Charlotte now. But, at this moment Lucy had nothing but a mocking smile on her face. Is she even worthy to be his wife? I will show her what it means to be the wife of a chosen one. She doesn't have what it takes to be a wife of a chosen one. Inside Brian's apartment. Look like we need some repairs, Charlotte commented while looking at the broken wall in front of her. Brian shook his head and said, I am planning on relocating. Relocating? Charlotte and Ely looked at him with surprise. I had a backup place to live in case this location gets exposed to others. So, I built a mansion in Zone C. From now on, we are going to live there. Brian answered with a normal expression. But, when they heard his words, both of their eyes widened. We are going to live in a mansion. Daddy, are we really going to live in a mansion? How big is it? Does it have a large pool? How big is the garden? Does it have a swing? Can we also get a puppy? Hearing Ely's demands, Brian suddenly felt tired. He took a deep breath and said. First, you need to complete 2% of that AI to make a demand. Second, you need to get ready for school. Third, you need to understand that we are moving there because of the danger we have been exposed to. Now, pack your things. Ely pouted, but she didn't make any drama. She quietly left her room while Charlotte asked in front of Brian. Brian raised his head and looked at her for a moment. She bites her lips as it got harder to say, but she finally asked. Is there a way for me to get stronger? When he heard her words, his eyes widened. He didn't expect Charlotte to say such a thing. He couldn't help but ask. You aren't blaming yourself, are you? Because you know I would hate such a thing. Charlotte shook her head and said, I am not blaming myself, but I don't want to stay like this. You know we are already exposed. So, our trouble won't be small the next time. So, can you help me? Brian stood up and raised her head. Who do you think I am? Being one of the smartest people on this planet, do you think I wouldn't have a solution? Let's go to our new home and I will show you my new invention. Sort of new with old technology. Hearing his words, Charlotte's eyes widened. She gave him a big hug and a kiss while thinking. It won't be long before she comes knocking on our door. Just because she is strong now won't make me discouraged. I will surpass her. Chapter 47 New Mansion, New Technology. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Oh, wow. Standing in front of a giant mansion, Ely admired it in awe. It was gigantic, even bigger than her mother's mansion. Charlotte was shocked as well. She didn't expect their mansion to be this big. It was big, but the garden around it was even bigger. The man was only 500,000 square feet. It was the garden that had spread around 3 million square feet. Daddy, keys. Ely stretched her hand as she activated her exploration mission. You don't need keys in here. Brian smiled and Ely immediately got the idea. She dashed towards the mansion and when she reached the front of the door, she shouted. Lily, open the door. The next moment, the giant door opened automatically. Everything was automated. She directly rushed to the kitchen. When she saw this exquisite kitchen, she muttered. Bigger than Mother's kitchen. Then, she rushed to the bedroom. Bigger than Mother's bedroom. Then, she rushed to the bathroom. Bigger than Mother's bathroom. Finally, after 10 minutes, she came to a conclusion. Everything is bigger than in Mother's mansion. 0. This conclusion made her eyes widen. The next moment, she started running around with her vampire speed. Daddy, can I ask Lily to come here? Ely shouted from somewhere. Even she didn't know which room she had entered. You can. Brian had no idea about restricting his daughter's freedom. Hell. He came here just so that she could be even freer. Looking at the mansion around her, Charlotte tucked his sleeve and asked with a low voice. There are only 3 of us. Is it really necessary? She meant the size of the mansion. It was too big for 3 people. Brian smiled at her concern. She hasn't changed a bit. He grabbed her waist and pulled her close. Our lives will be more dangerous from now on. I just got the news that Lucas is dead. And he was killed by none other than Blood Queen. Once our existence is more visible to others, we will be in a lot of trouble. Did you see that gun that I used? It has the power to evaporate vampires' blood with ease. If this gets out, the vampire won't let us have it. And, much like that, they will also try to assassinate us. My existence is more threatening to the vampire and werewolves than the entire human combined. That's why we got no choice but to live with higher security. Hearing his words, Charlotte turned gloomy. It was clear that now their peaceful life had already ended. They don't even know when and how the next attack will come. She clenched her fists and looked straight into Brian's eyes. I will protect you. I definitely will. Oh. Brian was a little stunned by her words. He didn't expect her to get this motivated. He chuckled and said, "Haha. Then, I will leave the fighting to my love. Do your best to protect me." I will. Although he meant it in a funny way, she took it very seriously. Brian sighed and said, "Let's go. I will take you to the power chamber." Then, he looked upon the second floor and shouted, "Ely, come down. I have something to show you." Are we training her as well? Charlotte looked at Brian with surprise and asked. Brian nodded his head. She needs training. With her bloodline, she can improve at a rapid rate. The stronger she gets, the easier it will be for her to protect herself. Suddenly, his eyes turned dark as he continued, but the truth is that I don't want to threaten the world with nuclear weapons. I don't want her to get hurt so much so that I am afraid I will make a stupid mistake. Suddenly, Charlotte rubbed his hair and said, "You are the smartest person in this world. You will never make a stupid mistake." Hearing her words, Brian couldn't help but chuckle a little. She was right. He won't make a stupid mistake, but sometimes these stupid mistakes don't happen because of his lack of knowledge. They mostly happen because of his ignorance. If he had tried to look after the continuous loss of blood each month, he would have found out about his daughter in one way or another. If he had tried to understand Charlotte's feelings, he wouldn't have let her suffer so much. Everything happened because he tried to be ignorant. He was a smart person. He shouldn't be ignorant about anything. "Hey, put your hand away from my daddy's head." Suddenly, Ely's voice woke him up. He looked at Ely, who was pouting at Charlotte. But Charlotte was simply rubbing his hair and teasing her. "Let go of his hair." Ely roared when she was teased. At this moment, her bloodlines suddenly exploded, but she quickly realized her mistake and took it back. But then she realized something else. Charlotte wasn't affected at all. Seeing her confused eyes, Charlotte chuckled and showed her a bracelet. "Bloodline suppression device. Hee, now you can't do anything to me. Ah. I will fight you for daddy." Ely trembled with anger and burst out her bloodline pressure as she rushed toward Charlotte. She started slamming her fists on Charlotte's stomach and back, but her strike didn't even make Charlotte flinch. Suddenly, Brian picked her up and spoke. "Let's go." The next moment, the ground beneath them illuminated in blue and the ground suddenly split open. Ah! The next moment, they fell towards the unknown territory and screamed. It was too surprising for them. After all, they didn't expect to fall down. They expected to take an elevator. But, when they reached their destination, their body slowly floated for a moment as their speed decelerated and they fell on their feet. What was that? Charlotte looked at Brian and shouted. For a moment, she almost cried. Her face turned bright red. Sorry. I thought Ely liked rides, so I recently replaced the elevator with an anti-gravity device. Look. Brian chuckled as he pointed at the elevator, which was kept on the corner. Only then, did Charlotte look at this room closely. She saw a bunch of holograms lying around and lots of computers. There were nearly hundreds of bulbs lighting up the entire room. But, his room seems to be the size of the entire mansion. Suddenly, Charlotte looked at Brian and suspiciously asked, "You didn't build the mansion so big for security, did you? You built it so that you can put all of your scientific stuff underground. Is it so obvious?" Brian embarrassedly chuckled when she found out the truth. Bam! Don't you dare lie to me. Charlotte punched his stomach and spoke with an angry expression, but she was blushing as well. She remembered how determined she was when she told him that she will protect him. But, now, it felt like she made a fool of herself. At the same time, Ely's body suddenly trembled. She saw Charlotte in a new light for the first time. That hurts. It really hurts. She punched him in his stomach and didn't control her strength. You deserve it for making me look like a fool. Charlotte crossed her arms and snorted. Come on. I wasn't kidding. I really need you to protect me. Brian grunted as he clutched his stomach in pain. Really? Charlotte turned her eyes at him and suspiciously asked. Really? Brian nodded his head with a serious expression. All right. The next moment, her serious and suspicious expression instantly disappeared with a bright smile as she nodded her head. Thank God, she doesn't get too angry. Brian was really lucky. Charlotte wasn't the type who would throw tantrums, but she also feels angry whenever she is teased. Alright, let me show you something. Brian started walking as the pain fades away. Two of them closely followed him. After a while, they reached in front of the giant blue holographic container. Seeing this, the two of them looked at Brian for an explanation. Ahem. Let me introduce my latest invention, power chamber. Hearing his words, both of their eyes glowed bright, but Charlotte's eyes dimmed quickly as she asked. So, what does it do? Good questions. How about all three of us enter this chamber? Brian asked, and they quickly followed him. After they entered the chamber from a door, they noticed that the blue transparent walls of this chamber were quite thick. Charlotte walked near the wall and asked, "Can I punch it?" "Well, use your full strength." Brian chuckled and she nodded her head. Bang! She punched the wall with her full strength, but when it touched the wall, the impact suddenly spread out like a wave and disappeared. It didn't even make a scratch. This is not an ordinary chamber. This is built with nanolasers conjuring the energy shield. And, this chamber is an energy shield itself. It has an overwhelming defense against anyone within rank 9. Of course, it can't block the attacks of those who are above the 9th rank. In fact, the entire mansion has hundreds of nanolasers that can conjure this energy shield around it. Charlotte and Ely looked at him with wide eyes and surprise. So, how is going to help us train? Charlotte asked with confusion. It was a great defense, but they are here for training. Well, then allow me to introduce the core function of this power chamber. Chapter 48 Daddy touched the fourth dimension. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 4 years ago, I joined the UMA in order to create the idea that I developed during 1 year of my despair. This idea was actually very simple, but the logic, science, and the entire functions behind the idea was something nobody in this world has come up with. They couldn't prove the certain theories in this idea because they don't even know where to begin. And, if you don't know where to begin, how can you solve that theory? I am smart because for certain things, I know where to begin, especially when it comes to the technology. After I know where to start, I sink my head into that theory and eventually prove it. Like that, I was able to develop a certain mechanism that can absorb the zero-point energy surrounding us. Space is everywhere. Literally, everything is space, but when it is a vacuum of the space, there will be zero-point energy. Due to a certain biological difference, humans can't absorb this zero-point energy. They lack something and I don't know what it is, but I will soon find out. Anyway, although I don't know what they lack, I do know how to absorb the zero-point energy. So, creating this mechanism, I was able to create the new gods where the main processor of the entire server absorbs the zero-point energy into the virtual world that we created. The three-dimensional virtual world is not something new, but due to the access of zero-point energy, we were able to evolve everything that resides with the virtual world. Of course, none of this is important to you. But, this power chambers applies the same mechanism. It absorbs the zero-point energy and recondenses every particle of the zero-point energy to make it denser. When vampires or werewolves absorb the zero-point energy, their cells mutate with the help of that energy, but because the amount of energy absorbed at one point is very small, they can only be mutated by 0.00001% in a second. But, what if we change the size of the zero-point energy but not three-dimensional size, rather something unique? Okay, you won't understand what am I going to say, but it's actually simple. 0. Tapping into the fourth dimension, I managed to rearrange the subatomic particles of the zero-point energy in such a way that now, the particle of that energy can soak more zero-point energy into it in order to further increase its quality. In simple terms, the zero-point energy in this chamber is 20 times much better than normal zero-point energy, which means your training speed will increase by 20 times if you train here. Hearing his words, both of their eyes widened. Charlotte didn't know what to say because she didn't understand much except the last line. As for Ely, she almost fainted. But, she quickly shook her head and asked. But Daddy, isn't there only 3 dimensions? The 4th dimension is only a theory. How did you tap into the 4th dimension? What is it called? Hearing her words, Charlotte looked at Ely with surprise. Perhaps, only she can ask such questions at the age of 8. Brian chuckled and said, of course, in our observable universe, there are only 3 dimensions. You can't say that there is another dimension without proving it, but nobody has done it before until I found a way. You see, the 4th dimension exists everywhere, but it is hidden because the only way to access the 4th dimension is through quantum world. But, the quantum world itself is something that people don't know how to navigate properly. Of course, I have built a tech that can navigate inside the quantum world. It allows me to enter the quantum world in order to tap into the 4th dimension, but this dimension is kind of an outcome rather than the process. Oh. I use my technology to rearrange or change the subatomic particles and quarks. This manipulation allows me to further enhance or recreate certain energy or matter. Don't think too much about this now. You still need to finish your first project before you want to dive into the quantum world. Hearing his words, Ely made a sad and teary face. She wanted to visit the quantum world. She wanted to mess with the 4th dimension as well. But, she can't deny her father's words. After all, she hasn't studied quantum mechanics yet. At this moment, she promised herself that she will complete the project within 2 years. Okay, you two can start training inside this chamber. Ely, I want you to completely listen to her. If she complained about you, then I won't be good to you. Brian didn't forget to warn her, knowing how much she hates Charlotte. Humph. You don't need to say. Ely folded her arms and pouted cutely. Brian chuckled and walked out of the power chamber. Although he has found a way to help them, he still can't improve his strength without new gods. He must enter new gods and improve his strength. After entering the pod, he enters the new gods. The moment he enters, he appears outside the dungeon. It surprises him. But, when he walks closer to the gate of the dungeon, a panel appears in front of him. Solo, party, seeing this, he hesitated for a while. Then, he opened his friend list. From there, he called Silvertongue. Hello, Silvertongue. Hey, what's up? Are you playing New Gods? Of course, I am currently inside the dungeon with others. Oh. Wait, do you want to join us? I was thinking about it, but since you are already inside, I wasn't sure if I should ask you to come out. It's not a problem. We were just stuck on the 5th floor. We will log out first and then join you if it's alright with you. No problem. I will wait for you outside. After a short chat, he finally closed the call. He looked at the door and decided to wait. After all, from floor 5th, it is good to go with a party rather than going solo. After all, there is a high chance of LVL. 15 monsters living on the 5th floor. By the way, they also said that they haven't crossed the 5th floor. I wonder what level they are at right now. George was already LVL point 10 days ago, now he should be around LVL point 15, right? That guy is seriously working hard to support his family. Having people like him as superheroes would be a blessing to humanity. I seriously need to make a way to bring things outside the game. If I do that, I would be able to bring Elixir of Life to help James. Thankfully, his lifespan has also increased a lot due to his awakening. Or else, he would only have less than 50 years to live. Thinking about James, his expression got serious. James was an alien. This was something James told him, but he didn't dare to tell James about his weird ability to talk with technology. The sole reason why he was able to create these things was because of this ability, but it isn't an ability that superheroes awaken. Because he doesn't have a shred of 0.point energy. This overwhelmingly confuses him because often he also thinks of himself as an alien. But, his DNA matches with his parents, and his parents were completely normal humans. They didn't even have his ability. So, he doesn't know whether to call himself an alien or a normal human. It didn't make sense at all. The more he thinks about it, the more helpless he gets. Finally, he stopped thinking about it, and at the same time, Silvertongue and his party appeared. Dragon Rider 97, sorry for making you wait. As soon as Silvertongue arrived, he apologized. Come on, you are making me look like a bad guy. Thanks for coming. Can you add me to your party? Brian shook his head and spoke. All right. Silvertongue added him to the group instantly. Oh, hello Brian, how are you? What level are you in? Did you enter the mega dungeon? Suddenly, Shirley appeared in front of him and started asking him questions. She didn't get too close, but she seemed excited. I'm fine. I am currently LVL 10, yes, I did enter the mega dungeon a day before yesterday. Brian honestly replied the answer to each question, which made other boys look at him with weird gazes. Dragon Rider 97, you don't need to answer her every question. Anyway, let's enter the dungeon. Dave Stone shook his head and responded after seeing my confusion. What do you mean, Dave? Do you think my questions are insignificant? His words enraged Shirley as she roared at him, but Dave Stone wasn't shrinking back either. Of course, your questions are insignificant. And, do you have to ask his level? Don't you even know the courtesy of a player? You. Dave, if you dare to say that again, I will tell everyone that you kissed Mary behind Sophie's back. Shirley didn't back down either. She instantly threatened him. Hearing her words, Dave's face turned bright red. That was just an accident. Yeah. Do you dare to say that to Sophie? Chapter 49, 5th Floor Part 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Shouldn't we do something? Brian turned his head at George and asked. Let's not get involved. Sorry about this. George bitterly smiled and shook his head. You don't have to apologize every time. By the way, congratulations on becoming a hunter. Brian was helpless against his apologies. He didn't understand why George was being so polite. Thank you. George responded. By the way, what kind of monster did you face on the 5th floor? Brian asked, seeing the non-ending battle between Shirley and Dave. Hearing his question, George's expression turned serious. We encountered the wolves. At first, we thought they were normal wolves at LVL.15. But, none of those wolves were normal. Every wolf had an elemental power. And, the leader, we didn't even get a chance to face him. We almost died once, but thanks to Tempest, we managed to escape. Brian was surprised. As he expected, the 5th floor had LVL.15 monsters, but he didn't expect them to be elemental wolves. Unlike normal wolves, elemental wolves are much stronger due to their elemental control. Then, he quickly glanced at Tempest. He looked the same. He was wearing a white robe and holding a book in his hand as usual. But, Brian could feel a little difference. He couldn't help but ask. Did you improve your physical capabilities? Tempest nodded his head and lowered his head. I bought body strengthening potion and used it. That's great. Your class will make the disparity between physical strength and mana larger. If you don't keep improving your physical strength, you will one day die by using simple words. The more mana you gather, the stronger body you need. Your bookworm class is amazing, but you need to find other ways to improve your physical strength. Brian liked Tempest a lot, especially his idea of becoming a bookworm. 0. Tempest's eyes shone when he heard Brian's response. He quickly nodded his head. You seem to like this class a lot. George couldn't help but feel curious about Brian's interest in this class. Bookworm is one of the 3 choices I have for sub-class. This class is very strong, and if you can somehow manage to fill its disadvantage, you will be invincible. Brian chuckled as he walked towards Tempest. I have one short tip for you. I don't know how you exercise at home, but from now on, you can start exercising. Bookworm class increases your mana exponentially. You should have already felt it, and it also gives you affinity to all magic and elements. This means you can easily use fire magic or healing magic outside as well. But, if your outside world's body is weak, then the consequences would be the same. No, it would be dire. Because you won't die for real in here. But, you will die for real in the real world. Hearing his words, Tempest got frightened to the point he trembled for a while, but he quickly bowed his head in front of Brian and responded. Thank you for giving me the advice. Brian chuckled and walked away. At the same time, the conflict between Shirley and Dave ended. Party warrior can start from the 5th floor. Would you like to start from the 5th floor? Yes, no, oh. Seeing this, George looked at others, especially Brian. Everyone nodded their heads, and the next moment, their bodies disintegrated into pixels as they entered the dungeon. Their pixels were rearranged when they appeared on the 5th floor. If the 4th floor was a small forest, then the 5th floor was a bigger forest. They appeared in the middle of the forest. So, let's make a proper plan before we fight Elemental Wave. Dragon Rider 97, do you have any suggestions? George turned his head at Brian and asked. You can call me Brian. It's a lot easier that way. And, yes, I do have a plan. Currently, I am LVL.10. What about you guys? Brian asked. George blinked his eyes and said, I am currently LVL.14. Shirley is LVL.14, Dave is LVL.13 and Tempest is LVL.12. As for our skills, I have unlocked another close range attack. Shirley has unlocked a long range attack. Dave has a stronger defensive skill and Tempest can heal every faster now. What about you? Brian nodded his head and said, I also have a long range attack and short range. Since our enemies are at LVL.15 and also have the elemental powers, we can't simply charge forward. How many elements have you seen using them? George turned his head at Tempest and stared for a moment. Fire, water, earth, wood, wind. Tempest replied. Brian nodded his head and said, although elemental wolves are powerful due to their elemental powers, they are also easier to defeat because of those elements. For example, fire element wolf would be weak against the water. Wood and wind element wolf would be weak against fire. Water is weaker against the wind and earth. But, the earth is also weak against wind. Since we don't have more than one mage, we need to break this situation into a different way. George will handle every earth element wolves. Shirley and I will handle wood, water, and wind element wolves with our long range attacks. Finally, Dave will fight against the fire elemental wolves. Tempest will stay behind and support us with healing abilities and other element supports. Since he can manipulate all kinds of elements, if we run into a situation where someone needs to interfere, he will be the best choice. Since we don't know which wolf has which element, I will use AoE spell to find out their element. Once we select our target, all of us will attack at once. By the way, Wolf Leader won't appear till the end, right? George shook his head. We didn't see him during our battle. It means he will appear at last since we didn't even reach that point. That's good then. We can attack without any worries about the leader. Brian brightly smiled. But, are you sure Shirley and you can handle 3 different elements of wolves? There are almost more than 20 wolves from each element. You two would be facing against more than 6 wolves of LVL.15. And, your LVL is only 10. Don't get me wrong. I know how strong you are, but I am not sure if this is a good idea. George hesitated for a moment before asking Brian and confirming with him. Brian shook his head and said, "Don't worry. As I said before, if we have a perfect element to counter, then we can easily win. The level doesn't matter that much, especially when the gap is only 5 levels. And, even if we do get overwhelmed with numbers, we still have Tempest. I put him in support in case such situations occur." George was still worried but Shirley tried to calm him down. "Don't worry, George. Didn't he just say that we can win if we follow this strategy?" "Miss Shirley, I never said we will win. I only say this is the best way to fight against the elemental wolves." Brian shook his head and chuckled. "Can't you see I am helping you?" Shirley shouted at Brian and folded her arms while looking away. "This game is risky. There is nothing you can earn without taking risks. So, we must go with this strategy unless you have something better." Brian chuckled and responded to George. George took a deep breath and nodded his head. "All right. Let's fight. Follow me, the wolves are a little far from here." "Oh," George walked at the front as he led the entire team towards the pack of wolves. They walked for 5 minutes until a status panel appeared in front of them. Floor quest activated, quest number 5. Defeat the wolf leader reward. 5,000 XP, 500 gods coins, and skill upgrade rune punishment. 0.10000 EXP, wait, the punishment isn't death or kicked out of the dungeon. Brian looked at them and asked with confusion. Death and kicked out of the dungeon? No, it has always been the EXP problem. Thankfully, it cuts EXP from each of us, or else, our loss would have been huge. George shook his head and explained. Brian touched his chin and thought, maybe it is only applied to solo players. No wonder Party Hunt is always less risker. Not just from the perspective of the player but also from the game. Alright. Let's get ready. Once the quest is generated, the wolves will appear. George looked around him with alertness in his eyes. Gur, 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 gur. Slowly, the wolves started coming out from behind the trees. These wolves were nearly 1.5 meters tall and 3 meters long. They had ferocious expressions on their faces. And, each of them had the virtual LVL projection above them. And, all of them were LVL.15. But, since all of them were gray, it was hard to say which wolf had which element. Brian walked to the front as his mana slowly flowed out in his palm. Upon reaching a certain distance, an overwhelming amount of mana flowed into his palm. Dark magic skill, slaughtering crows. He slapped the ground and a symbol appeared around him. Slowly, crows started emerging for the symbol. In a few seconds, nearly 9 crows appeared around him. Brian raised his hand towards the wolves and said, "Attack." Chapter 55th Floor Part 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Although he could give the order through his mind, he still decided to shout. It was simple action but it always gives a huge boost in morale to a team. With his order, 9 slaughtering crows rushed towards the wolves. This time, he once again used the crow to poison those wolves. The wolves have an incredible sense of danger. So, when they sensed the danger from the crows, they immediately covered their bodies with elements. Seeing this, Brian smirked. Just as he predicted, those wolves do not like poison or any dark magic. But, there were still more than 50 wolves who didn't activate their element. Rather, they waited. The wolves at the front started attacking those crows. Everyone, attack. Brian didn't let this moment vanish. He released mana into his finger and conjured a bolt of lightning. Thunderbolt. Bang. His thunderbolt struck the wolf who had covered his body with the water element. The thunderbolt passed through the water while influencing the water as well. The wolf jumped due to shock and landed on the ground unconscious. Brian got a little surprised. He thought his thunderbolt would kill the wolf but it only knocked him unconscious. This not only surprised him but also made him serious. 0. He won't waste 5 MP just to knock these wolves. He immediately took out his swords. Infusing 2 points of mana in his swords, he stomped his foot on the ground and took the stance where he held both swords hilt against each other. Dragon Rider 97 Sword Art, Stealth Dragon Claw. Splash. Splash. With a single sword slash, he managed to take down 2 of the wind element wolves. As their heads fell on the ground, he paused and spun. The swords spun with him and conjure a tornado. Dragon Twister, the wind surrounding his swords slashed the dozens of wolves. Each wolf around him had the element conjured shield, but when his sword slashed the shield, it shattered those shields and then slashed those wolves' skin. His swords didn't pierce their muscles at all. Thud. 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 Thud, oh. When those wolves fell to the ground, covered with blood, they immediately got up. Even though their bodies were covered with blood, they weren't mortally injured. Their reaction shocked Brian and they managed to slam dozens of wind blades, water blades, and wood blades toward him. Fly. Suddenly, Brian felt his body floating towards the sky. Before long, he reached the height of 10 meters in the air. Beneath him, different swords collided with extreme force, cutting each other. Brian turned his head to the south where he saw a boy using his mana to hold him in the air. His forehead was covered with sweat and his eyes were extremely red. He was barely holding Brian in the air. "Drop me." Brian spoke as he closed his eyes. Tempest clearly heard him and released his powers. Brian directly fell in the middle and for a second nothing happened. But, when those wolves realized his presence, they immediately rushed toward him with their blades. Brian opened his eyes and suddenly, one of his swords disappeared. He held the hilt with both of his hands and infused nearly 10 points of mana into his sword. With all of his strength focused on his hand, he stabbed the sword in the core. The next moment, his mana transformed into the bolts of lightning and spread out from his sword. Bang! 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 Dragon Rider 97 Sword Art, 3rd Stance. Thunder Dragon Stomp. At this moment, everyone turned their eyes to him, including his team. That strike was too strong. Each bolt of lightning struck those wolves. Before they could recover, Brian stood up and another sword appeared in his hand. 1st Stance. Dragon Twister. Without any hesitation, he swung his arms and conjured a tornado with the power of his swords. As soon as those wolves got caught in the tornado, they started dying. As soon as he finished killing them, his EXP skyrocketed. Unlike before, once he kills the monster above LVL 10, he gets 10 EXP for each level. Before he only used to get 5 for each level. Now, killing a 15-level wolf gives him 1.100.50 EXP. When he stopped, he sighed. He used a lot of mana during these 2 attacks and now he only has 10 points of mana left. He must recover his mana but the wolves won't give him a chance. Thankfully, inside the dungeon, his whole party was getting the full EXP. This is a major advantage of Mega Dungeon. And, they want more party players rather than solo. Their goal is to make a greater unity between humans. And, Brian understands this very clearly. But, he still wanted to level up by himself. Because only under that condition, does he truly push himself to the limit. Because this is not just a game anymore. It was a whole new world that evolved after a game. Just like how he did a few seconds ago. He managed to merge the mana of the Thunderbolt into his sword to create a new attack. It did cost him 10 mana points but he succeeded in creating a new stance with his exceptional mana control and powerful sword skill. But, he hasn't perfected this stance or else, it would only cost him 2 MP. He looked at the remaining wolf and noticed that Dave Stone was facing a problem. Since he was the tank of this team, he was responsible for protecting Tempest. But, with a lot of wolves attacking him at once, it became a lot harder. Suddenly, Brian thought of an idea. He dashed towards Tempest. First, he kicked the wolf near Tempest and saved him. "Hey kid, have you ever read cultivation novels?" Brian asked. Tempest nodded his head and spoke, "Fighting for eternity, magic and martial war god, Yang harmony system, sword devil also dual cultivates. And strongest offline cultivation. Are you 18? When Tempest mentioned the name of those novels, Brian narrowed his eyes and asked. Oh, hearing his words, Tempest suddenly blushed and lowered his head with shame. In fact, he wasn't 18. But, do you care? Does it matter if you are 18 or not? Brian was speechless at his reaction. He sighed, "Alright, since you have read those novels, you should have read that move where Chin Che condenses a lot of swords in the air, right?" Tempest nodded his head, but the next moment, he suddenly realized something. His voice started to shake. That even possible. At this moment, Brian pats his shoulder and says, "Boy, do you think developers gave Bookworm class such a weakness for fun? You have no idea how much potential this class has. Anything you have read in a book and can visualize, you can create it. Now is the best time to shine. Use that move and kill these wolves. Don't worry. You only need to bear the pain, you won't die." Tempest rolled his eyes. It was easier said than done. After all, if he wants to create something of that large scale, the backlash would be something he had never borne before. Ba-dot-dump, ba-dot-dump. Suddenly, he heard his heartbeat. He realized that he was feeling excited. He was scared, but he was also excited. At this moment, he closed his eyes and an immense amount of mana burst out of him. 10,000 swords returned to sect. At this moment, only 50 swords but each with glistering golden mana appeared above them. Splash!